Welcome, traveler of the void. Tonight's story we will be talking of A Taste of Mercy. But before we get to that, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe for more content. There is no hunger without mercy, says the catechism. The emperor fills the empty bowl, but bowl crack, and mercy, if left long enough, grows a skin. Fragment of shrine graffiti scrubbed from transit chapel wall, Gathis Prime, M41 997. Chapter 1. The Shift Bell. Ryn Valas walked to the sound of the refinery siren, a wavering iron howl that passed through stained concrete and thin flesh, made teeth remember they were stone. He had learned, as every worker did, that the sirens never exactly agreed with the timestamps in the bunkhouse, or the lumen bars in the hall, or the cracked chrono that once belonged to a man whose name had evaporated from the slate. The sirens were true because they were loud. In Hive Gathis Prime, truth was the thing that bullied you. He dressed with the ritual care of a citizen who feared random inspection. Grey work smock stamped with the aquila, hood cinched, mask clipped to the collar, the little purity tag on its frayed red ribbon, patted for luck. He had replaced the cog and skull pin on his smocked pocket twice this year. The brass tarnished faster now. A sign of the air, he told himself. A sign of the times, others said, with a shrug. The corridor outside the dormitory was a tunnel of condensation. Condensers dripped into rusted channels that fed into larger channels that fed into the sump where the refinery drank its own breath and made it useful again. The floor trembled to the steps of 1,000 bodies obeying the same siren. Ryn walked with them, neither slow nor fast, letting the tide carry him towards the transit rail. He did not meet eyes. You learned quickly that eye contact meant conversation, and conversation meant words, and words were the most dangerous currency in the hive. The administratum took a tithe on words with keen knives. He boarded the rail transport with the rest of 117's mid-tier. Chemistry handlers, quality control clerks, auger readers, valve turners. The carriage smelled of bitter solvent and damp wool. Someone had chalked a crooked sigil above the door, 2 circles and a smile, but the night cleaners had scrubbed it to a sickly halo. The air swayed, the carriage lurched. Through the slotted windows, Ryn saw the high strata flick past. Market layers with their threadbare stall canopies, blocked like brick beehives, their cells pulsing with dim lumen. Brine niches stuffed with burned tallow and little paper saints melted into stalactite. Gathis Prime had been a proud hive one. The manufactura rose like iron mountains then, and the refineries ran hot on ore from real mines. That was before the subcontinental subsidence swallowed the eastern reaches in one grinding year. The mines drowned and the hive learned a crueler way to feed itself. The corpse-starch plant bloomed like tumors in the ruins. Ryn's plant, Refinery Complex 117, squatted on an old railhead where the barges came to juicing. The arches over the intake pit still wore stained glass picks of saints carrying wheat sheaves that had never grown on Gathis. Over the new doors, the same saints held bowls. When the rail disgorged them, the workers split into lanes by discipline. Ryn followed the yellow line marked 2C/assay to the assay hall. a long nave of steel tables, each with a lamp, a bin of sample slugs, a ledger plate, and a stamp. He took his place at table 17, logged in by some bite on the slate's flaking contact pad, and watched the sample line start to crawl. The samples came like everything else in the hive, in weight, in sameness, in a rhythm strained by the lash of necessity. Pale blocks of rendered matter shaved from the vat, stamped with batch codes, slid down the conveyor and dropped with tidy stonks into the metal tray. Ryn shaved curls with the dull blade into a ceramic cup and added reagent from a labeled dropper. The curl went brown, then grey, then a bruised plum at the edges, rich in calcium, short in amino, and not above will, he noted. He did not look too hard at the way the reagent made little bubbles like breath. On the third block, the reagent stuttered and ran. The curl did not darken, it writhed. Ryn leaned closer, pen paused. The curl didn't move. Of course it didn't. Only the reagent, it seemed, in some trick of the lumen angle. He blinked, and it was nothing. He stamped the tray tag, pushed it down the chute to the packaging supervisor, and told himself he needed food. The hall overseer banged his baton on the rails as if calling a congregation to stand. "Quality!" he bellowed, box grey. "We are behind on 9. You will not be behind on 10. The Emperor is watching." Ryn kept his pen moving. The Emperor was watching everything. The shrines were to be believed. Looking properly meant lighting the right candles in the right boxes at the right times. A priest once said in a dorm sermon that the Emperor's gaze was a comfort. Ryn had believed him, tried to believe him still, but when the siren closed the morning shrift with a shriek and the hall sighed with palsied metal dust after a storm, Ryn had the foolish notion that the Emperor's eyes slid past Refinery 117, as healthy eyes look past a sore too long watched. He wrote his name on the ledger, joked with no one, and followed the flow to the canteen. The canteen served 5 kinds of broth that were the same broth. The difference was in the salt. Ryn took the one labelled 2 and sat near a column where 2 pipes leaked heat. He blew on the cup. He did not drink. He listened. Listening in a hive is like stealing a tooth with your tongue. You cannot help yourself. At the table behind him, 2 auger readers spoke in professional whispers about a jam in the mill press. At the next table, a valve turner coughed a wet cough that made someone else move their cup further away. Somewhere, a child rattled a toy cog, and beneath the clatter and the slurp, there was a low, slow sound that might have been the refinery's heart or the earth thinking about the weight of it. "Ryn," someone said, very softly. He turned. No one was looking at him. A woman in blue overalls, blue was not an authorized color, he looked away, was washing her cup as if absolving it. The auger readers made a rude joke. The valve turner coughed again, and the cough sounded like a laugh. The siren pulled them up again. On the way back to the hall, a chaplain in plastic robe stood on a crate and waved a pamphlet. "Duty is mercy," he intoned. "Your bowls are full because your hearts are. Prayers at 13, attendance noted." Ryn took a pamphlet because to refuse one was to invite a question, and to invite a question was to starve alone. He did not read it. He folded it into a neat square and slid it under the smock at his chest, where the smell of the press hall had long ago made the human smell of him a stale thing. When the next batch came down, he leaned into the work. The curl fell just so, the reagent fell just so, the steel clicked, the line moved. The day went on, and on, and on. Chapter 2, Shrines and Stain. Bunks were given to those who slept, niches to those who prayed. Ryn did both in the same place, because the Dom's chaplain shrine was built under the conduit that provided heat to his bunk. The shrine was a wall of tile saints whose faces had been abraded smooth by kisses and cloth, and a little ledge of tallow lumps filigreed with fly hairs where flame had been and would be again. The chaplain said flies were a sign that mercy was present, because mercy drew the weak. The chaplain said many things. He was a man trying to stand against the sea with a pocketbook. Ryn knelt, because it cost nothing to kneel, and it could cost much not to. He mouthed the hymn's bones in his voice, too soft to wake anyone. The words were old and fit his mouth poorly. He offered the day's labour as proof of his belief. He asked nothing. Asking itself was dangerous. After he lay under the conduit chemical warmth and listened to the dozen snores in the column of bunks. These are the sounds of the city. They were you. You became them, or you were a shape that the sound found and rounded out and wore down. Ryn closed his eyes and watched the assay hall light swim behind his lid. Then he slept, and the siren lit his dreams. And the siren became a human voice, and a voice said, as if to a child too frightened to eat, "But now, little one, eat. The bowl is good, because it is full." He woke to the taste of copper. His tongue had bled in the night. It had done that when he was a boy during the season of ash storms, when they had burned the old tenement to reclaim the brick, and the smoke crept into the bones of your mouth. He swallowed the taste. He washed with a rag that had been wiped before the refinery was built. He did not look at the shrine as he left. The shrine looked at him. You could feel such things. The transit rail creaked. The carriage smelled of yesterday. The chalk circle and smile had been painted over with thick greased black. Over it, a neat notice in Minnesoran script. Blasphemous character of the divine banned by either. Fines will be levied. At the plant, the overseer was in a pious mood. He made them line up for a chanted blessing before shift starts. Duty fills the bowl, suffering salts it. He had brought a little bell. The first clang set Ryn's teeth on edge. The second seemed to have no sound at all, only a sensation on the tongue like sweet iron. The third clang made the hall's light drip. They said afterwards it was just a bad power. The hive was a very large machine. It did not mean harm. It was just old. Ryn cut curls and added drops and markers to the ledger. He measured, checked, stamped. He noticed nothing, because noticing was a luxury. At mid-shift, when the hall was a humid cave where the body learned to be its own shadow, something in the conveyor made a noise like a fat man clearing his throat with authority. The belt shuddered. A block slid and caught his knuckles. He swore because you were allowed where when the plant took blood, he sucked at the cup and tasted the day-old reagent and something else. Salt, sweetness, meat, something like a memory of stew. The foreman's shadow passed over him like a low cloud. Don't get your blood in the cup, the man said without malice. It's hard to quantify. Ryn nodded and locked his jaw and kept his knuckles out of the way. The cup trembled, and a small bright thread of blood rolling along his skin and vanished into the cuff of his glove. He thought of nothing. He thought of a bowl. In the canteen, frost was thin enough to see a face in. He saw a child for an instant. He might have been looking at his own face 30 years ago. The child put his finger into the surface of the broth, and the broth took the finger. That was only reflection. He tipped the cup and drank. It was better than yesterday. He said nothing to anyone about that. On the return, the chaplain's pamphlet fell out of his smock. Ryn bent to pick it up and found that the ink had run, not from water, from something that had come out of the paper itself. The running ink left a clear space in the shape of a circle with 2 dots and a curve. He balled paper and threw it into the bin marked combustible. The bin belched steam with a smell like boiled sugar. He did not look at anyone to see if they had seen. That night, the dorm was a hive beneath a hive. The whispers travelled like gas, thin and dangerous. There had been a fire in packaging 9. A boy had died. Someone said he had been smiling. Ryn turned on his pallet and stared at the underside of the bunk above until the stains there became a map of something gentle. He deemed the kitchen. He walked with a mouth full of the word grandfather. He did not know why. Variant on batch 14, said Clerk. You marked acceptable with corrective addition. Show your addition. Ryn produced a small vial of hard salt, stamped with a Mechanica stamp deviant called the Cog Halo. Salt was a luxury, and medicine, and law. The vial was government property. In the old days, salt was pulled from the ground. On Gathis, it was rendered from bone. The clerk took the vial, noted its weight, and nodded as if approving the weather. Next variant. On his break, Ryn went to Shrine C, Box 12, because he could not avoid it. To avoid shrines was to invite a form. Forms became fines. Fines became days without broth. C Box 12 had been built by a grateful pipe layer after his son had returned from the guard without enough blood in him to feed the occupier in the sump. The boy had died in the dorm a week later. The pipe layer had painted the shrine with flowers that no one on Gathis had seen. The flowers had been repainted as sheaves when the Ministorum inspected. The sheaves were now brownness that wanted to be called a colour. Ryn lit a wick. The flame crept and shivered and went green for a heartbeat before settling to the honest orange. He did not look away. The green was surely the oil. The oilers had mixed something new. That was all. A thing can have a reason and still be wrong. Ryn, someone said. He did not turn. I am praying. Pray for cleaner filters, said the voice, like a smiling cut. He turned. It was Lothar Pell, the packaging supervisor whose hands were always clean. She was the kind who made you stand straighter without any authority at all. She flicked a glance at the flame and at the wick and at him and said, "We're losing weight in 9. If it's the assay upstream, say so, and I'll pinch them. If it's anything else, say nothing, and I'll pinch them anyway. It's just a line, Ryn said. These blocks come soft. I adjust the ledger straight. The breath is better, he said. It was not a question. He didn't answer. He smiled without teeth. Good, he said. The shipments are thin. If 117 keeps it level, we keep our quota. If we keep our quota, we keep our heat. If we keep our heat, we keep our people from walking into other shrines and asking different questions, you see. He saw. He had always seen. He nodded. When she left, he let the flame burn his knuckle long enough that a layer of him died. That night, after the sirens had sounded the sleep bell and the dawn was an animal breathing through the mouths of 100 men, Ryn lay awake and listened to the pipe. Behind the hum, behind the breath, there was something that sounded like a garden. Not a real garden. The sound of leaves soft about someone who had never seen a leaf. He smiled into the dark and passed his tongue into his cheek until the taste of his own blood brought him back to the bunk. At some hour, when the time was a rumour, he walked to the sound of footsteps that had no body. He sat up. The bunks breathed. The shrine tallow gnawed itself. Ryn swung his feet to the floor and waited for the shame to come. None did. He rose, and no one saw him, because they had learned not to see men when they had waked at hours not appointed for waking. He found himself in corridor 3-5, the one that looped around the vent stacks and came back on itself with the hypnotic error of a chant learned wrong in childhood. The scrubbers slept there in a line, their icons cracked and their cowls off, like turtles who had taken their shells off to be more honest. Something dripped. It smelled like the hive breath when the hive had been drinking too fast. In the corner, behind the last scrubber, a panel hung loose on two of its 4 bolts. No one had bolted anything well in years. Behind the panel was a shadow, which was expected. Within the shadow was a ladder, which was not. Ryn stood with the panel in his hands for a time that was part of the shape of the room. He put the panel down on the floor like a tray and put his hands on the ladder rails and waited for a siren to tell him to stop. No siren came. He climbed. The ladder ran like a story that didn't want to end. He passed the familiar stink of copper grease, the innards of the hive flues, the low thunder of ductwork. The ladder gave onto a catwalk of kind that he had not expected to find in a legal place. No hazard striping, no signs. The catwalk ran behind the walls of C Block 12 and bent around into a place that had once been painted the colour of painkillers. The end of the catwalk was a door. Its hinge pins had been pulled and then replaced with nails. He put his shoulder to it, made the sound of a thing telling the truth. It opened. The room was small. It had been a break room once. There were lockers and a tin table and 2 chairs that had never learned to sit still. On the table lay a book, a real one, bound in something that had not remembered it was skin. There was a smell in the room that the refinery had, in its naive youth, tried to call sweet, which the refinery had now learned to call home. Ryn touched the book because he had already sinned and might as well. The covers had no Imperial stamp. The pages were old. The letters were hands at once clumsy and loving. There were pictures drawn with a child's care, men with bellies like full satchels, women with arms like warm rope, children with fungus flowers behind their ears. There were bowls in every picture. They were all full. And he reads the words that were not his language, and he understands them. They say, "Eat, child, eat and be full. All rot is a kind of love." He stood with a book open, and his mouth open, and his heart open, and the room turned its face to him. On the locker back, a little glyph had been scratched with a key or a nail, a circle with 2 dots and a curve. It looked like a happy boil. He laughed. A breath only. He remembered the scrubber's foam. He thought of the dorm flies. He shut the book, as if he could shut the smell. He put it in the locker and shut the locker and erased with his sleeve the dust he had made. He stepped out. He closed the door. He replaced the panel. He smoothed the screws with his finger as if they were hair. In bed, his hands remembered the book as hands remember skin. He would not let go. He slept. He dreamed that someone large and kind sat on the edge of his bunk and put a hand on his back so heavy it was gravity. The hand patted him as if he were coughing. The hand smelled like soup. The four, no uncleanliness. They put in forces at the plant gate the next morning. Black coat over black, helmet like boiled beetles whose antennae were vox mics and night sight and thin sensors. The enforcers stood with the outer shape of authority that had long ago learned to do without inner strength. They checked papers. They made marks. One of them opened Ryn's lunch tin and picked up the bread, weighed it in his nostrils like a dog and put it down. "Smells sweet," he said. "Sweetness without permit is a fine." "It's yesterday," Ryn said, which was true. The enforcer wrote something. The words became a number. Numbers become days. They were not there to keep people safe. They were there to put fear wherever complacency had covered, and to cover wherever fear had made holes you could fall into and find questions. There had been a fire in Packaging 9. As the whispers had said, something had burned green. The air had warmed as if the hive had exhaled, and it decided to keep breathing on its own. The assay hall's first batch tested of copper and pennies, which was copper, and of breath. The reagent curdled like milk. The coil of matter in the cup made a wet sound as it settled. Ryn wrote acceptable and stamped the tag and shut his mouth on the word that wanted to come out. On the way to the latrines, he took corridor 3-5 without thinking. The scrubbers slept in their lines, like old men holding their breath. Ryn looked at the panel and put his hands on it as you put your hands on your forehead to check for fever. He left it alone. Not today. Back in the hall, the overseer let his baton tap the rail with an odd rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. It was almost a jig. A man laughed. It was a small laugh, and it broke like glass when it hit the air. The overseer froze, listened for the reason to beat someone, found none, unfroze. The hall breathed out. At second break, Ryn did what he had not done since his conscript days before the mines had drowned. He cut the line. He walked through the canteen, past the broth cauldrons, past the benches, past the sign that said "Shift, eat, beer," and the sign that said "All others eat a fine." He climbed the stairs to the mezzanine where the supervisors had their cups with handles. He did not know his feet. They knew him. Lord Pell stood by the rail, cup in hand, watching the hall below with a mother's frown. She did not turn when he reached her elbow. "You found something," she said, as if they had a pact. "I found nothing," Ryn said, which was less dangerous than a book. "The refinery is singing to you," she said. He sipped. Her cup steam made a little fog that stirred her lip. "It sang to my father. He cursed it and went to the mines, and the mines ate him. I stayed. I learned the song. It says, 'You are food for something. Decide what's eat you.'" He swallowed. "I check. I stamp. I correct. I do not decide." "You decide," she said. "Everyone decides. Or it is decided for them. You smell it, don't you? The sweetness behind the rot." She did not look at him. "If the broth tastes better, the city calms. If the city calms, the prayers charge slower. The priests will notice. They will bring words. Words make fires. Be careful." He stared at the line below him, men bent like question marks. The block, the lamp, the reagent cup like altar chalices. "If the broth tastes better," he said, "then perhaps the Emperor has not forgotten us." "Perhaps," he said, with a word like a knife with the tip blunted so it could be split between ribs without the point to blame. "Or perhaps someone else remembers. Either way, we eat." That night, Ryn went back to the panel. He raised it, and sure now, he climbed, he opened the door. The little room waited as rooms do when only one person remembers them. The book was on the table where he had not left it. It had turned itself to a page of a man with a very fine belly, laughing so hard his eyes were tears. The words said, without words, "You are so hungry, you have forgotten how to describe hungry. Eat, and you will remember." He took the book under his smock. The dawn shrine had more flies. Chaplain grinned through the sermon with a set mouth. The sleep bell rang like a cough. Ryn lay awake and read a language that was his hunger making letters. He learned names, not the Emperor's. He knew that one. Said it like stone. Names with warmth in them. Names that were tired of being scolded. Names that smelled like kitchens. Names that said grandfather. Names that said Uncle Rot. Names that said mercy wears a belly, not a whip. He slept with the book under him like a hot water brick. He dreamed a belly full of stars. He woke with tears on his face and the taste of broth the way broth would taste if the world loved you. Chapter 5. The Taste. They posted new notices at the gate by order of the Adeptus Ministorum. All unauthorized fraternities, guilds, prayer circles, and dietary societies are prohibited. Report suspicious gatherings. Mercy is obedience. Disobedience is hunger. The canteen added a thin slice of something to the broth. Ryn did not ask what it was. He knew what everything was. Knowing names was part of the horror of being alive here. He tasted it. It had a sweetness that did not come from salt, and a roundness that did not come from fat. He finished the cup and took the dregs with his finger, as you do when your mother watched. And because he had read the book, he imagined a mother watching. And because he had read the book, the imagining was not a wound. He began to hum at his station. He did not know the tune until he knew it, and then it was the sound scrubbers made when they were happy, which was never, which meant he was making it happen. The curl fell right. The reagent curled like laughter around the curl. The cup said yes in the language of steam. On third shift, boy in packaging 9 burst into the assay hall with his hair smoking. "Come see," he shouted before remembering to whisper. "The filter vats have grown skin." The hall froze. The overseer was not there. Ryn found he was already moving. He did not run. Running brought attention. He walked, and others walked, and they were a procession. The Packaging 9 vats were old jerry-rigged cylinders, big as things, with straining meshed caps which could not go through unless the boss's blood passed. The boy had not lied. There was the skin, a deep, waxy pelicin floating on the surface of the vat, quivering as the pump throdded, smelling like boiled sugar and the underside of a blanket. "It's contamination," someone said, into a pulsing silence. "Scrape it," Lothapel said, not shouting. "Take samples, log it as coagulate, the rest into the dryer." She was pale, but she did not fear. Ryn watched her set face, the way one stands into the wind and becomes a thing the wind must go around. He took the scraping knife as if it were a pen, slid it under the edge. The skin lifted with a reluctance that flattered his strength. It hung, shivering, a sheet of mercy. Ryn thought of his hand when he was a boy at the Hab's kitchen sink, lifting the skin from hot milk to make some stupid shape. He made this skin into a roll and laid it in the tray. The smell was not wrong. It was a different kind of right. It filled something in the hive that had been too proud to admit it needed. When the samples reached the assay hall, Ryn tried to be the man he had been the day before. He put the reagent on. The skin did not run. It did not resist. It received. The cup went slowly, the color of the inside of a peach. The steam told a story without words about winter and soup and other people's kitchens. He stamped, acceptable. Midnight, the dawn was hot with rumors you could bathe in. The chaplain's sermon was longer. He spoke of a false sweetener. He spoke of the trial of tongues. He invoked the saint who had eaten ashes for a year to learn humility. Ryn listened with his head bowed until the words ran together and became sounds he had never needed, like drums you put in a march to keep the children smiling. He went to the room behind the panel after lights out. He lit a stolen wick in an old nut tin. The book waited with patience that was kind rather than a correction. He found a page with a picture of a man with a cutting knife and a bowl. The words said in a language that made his jaw feel wider. "Feed them first, then they will hear you." He laughed and clapped the book as if it were a friend who had made a joke at his expense and his salvation. He tore the page out, hid it under his smock. He took his cutting knife. The first circle. The first circle was not a circle. It was 4 men and Lothapel standing shoulder to shoulder in a utility bay with the brothers sleeping like cows and the air sweet with old solvent. The men were ones Ryn had seen 1,000 times and never known. The valve turned over the cough, now without the cough. The augur reading whose hands had suffered an education in grief. A loader with scars on his teeth, and a boy from 9 with hair singed in the shape of a little halo. Ryn laid the scrapings in a tin and warmed them with the heat wand until they became a thing like pudding. He stirred with the stolen wick. He made the sign he had seen in the book without meaning to, the circle with 2 dots and a smile. He stopped, ashamed. Then he did it again with all the intention of his hunger. Bless us, daughter said. Why sin? Ryn laughed because crying would have been too honest. I'm no priest. Then be a cook, the daughter said. It's the same job done right. Ryn lifted a spoon. He tasted first because that's what cooks do. He tasted what was not a defense against hunger. It was a gift to it. He felt his lungs remember their work. He felt the cut on his knuckles stop aching. He felt the refinery siren recede for a blessed heartbeat into a room down the hall. He fed the men. He fed Lothar. He fed himself until the tin was clean. The boy from 9 licked the rim and did not apologize. Tomorrow, Ryn said, his voice steady in a way it had never been. We take more. We make sure 9 skins go out dry, not to waste. We correct the ledger as we must. We taste from each, and we note the batch numbers. We keep our heat, we keep our bowls, we feed those who work and those who watch, because even the overseer is hungry. And it is a sin to leave a creature in sin. You sound like a priest, the augur reader said, not unkindly. I sound like a man who knows a kitchen, said Ryn. Maybe that's closer to holiness than we've been taught. They dispersed with the care of thieves who believed they had done a good thing and feared that goodness had made them visible. Scrubbers sighed in their sleep. The panel on the wall hummed it to itself. In the corner, where the light made a puddle on the floor, a fly landed and cleaned its hands like a penitent. Ryn walked back through the corridor with his head high and his shoulders low. He felt watched. He did not feel judged. The feeling was a new one. He liked it. The dorm, he knelt, because habit is a line you can follow in the dark. The shrine's flame went green and stayed there a while before finding orange. The chaplain flinched and did not flinch again. Ryn closed his eyes and said the Emperor's prayer. Where the word Emperor sat, another word sat beside it on a bench that bumped it with a friendly hip. He lay in a bunk and put his hand on his belly and felt, for the first time in years, that his body was a thing that he could be used for something other than work. He dreamed of a garden. The plants were mushrooms with faces like grandmothers, and the beasts were little hearts that did not mind their work. The man, too large for the room, bent and kissed the top of Ryn's head, and the kiss left a damp patch that smelled like home. When he woke, the refinery siren sounded like a laugh trying to be polite. Order, paperwork. In the morning, there were more enforcers. There were Minotaur scribes taking statements from the air. There were 2 Mechanicus tech adepts with sensor wands that coughed Iaric, as if the place tasted of something impure. The notices were newer, blacker, more immediate. In the canteen, the broth had a sheen, and the sheen made the light behave kindly. Ryn stood in the assay hall as if the first block slid into the station. He cut the curl. He lifted the dropper. He paused. He put 1 drop in the cup and 1 on his tongue. He stamped acceptable. He stamped acceptable. He stamped until the stamp had the rhythm of a heartbeat he could love. Somewhere in the refinery, a scrubber laughed. The sound was a cough. The cough was not sick. Ryn wrote a number in the ledger that meant nothing, and a symbol beside it that meant everything to a handful of people who had learned a different word for mercy. A circle, 2 dots, and a curve. He did not look up when the overseer passed. He did not look down when the prayer bell stuttered. He did not look into the future because the refinery had taught him there was only more of this, and that had always been despair. Now it was a promise he wanted. After all, he was very hungry, and hunger, he had learned between the lines of a book with no sigils and a prayer at the universe's answers. One way or another,